Hey guys, welcome to another book talk with Livingston Parish Library. My name is Danielle. I am the Youth Services Manager at the Denham Springs branch, and today I am so excited to bring you Fantasy Series You Should Be Reading Part 2. So in last week's video, I did part 1 of Fantasy Series You Should Be Reading, and along with a whole introduction to summer reading 2020 at the Livingston Parish Library. So if you missed it, go check it out. There's lots of good information, and then we will be continuing the fantasy series that I want to fangirl about. I mentioned last week that I'm not going to talk about Harry Potter and Percy Jackson and Hunger Games and all of these other series because you've most likely already read them or seen the movies, or you know you should be reading these. So I'm going to be focusing on series that are popular in our library, but more people need to read them because they're amazing. So the first book that I wanted to talk about is probably my favorite book series of all time. It is a YA book, and if you've ever come into the Denham Springs Library and have talked to me about book recommendations, I've most likely mentioned this book. Seriously, I have made so many people read this series. It's really funny. So that brings us to our first series that you should be reading, which is the Throne of Glass series by Sarah J. Maas. Have I already talked to you about this? So Throne of Glass is essentially about the most feared assassin in all of a country called Audurlin, with the title of Audurlin's Assassin. And she just so happens to be an 18-year-old girl named Celaena Sardothien. Celaena Sardothien has been imprisoned in a slave camp for a whole year by the king of Audurlin. The king's son, the crown prince, and his captain of the royal guard, who's his best friend, have come to offer her a deal. So the king is hosting a competition for a new king's champion. So the prince wants to sponsor her in this competition, and if she wins, she would have to work for so many years for the king, and then she can be free. 10 years prior to this competition, magic completely vanished from the continent, and the king of Audurlin basically butchered and enslaved everyone. So Celaena has agreed to be in the competition, even for a king that she hates that has enslaved an entire continent just so she can gain her freedom. But when she gets there, she starts to realize that there is way more going on, and in a world that has no magic, how does she find traces of magic? And there's something loose murdering people, and she has to figure it out before she's next. I put off reading this book for a long time just because it was another competition book, and I was like, oh, I've seen all of that. No, it is so much more. I always tell people that I can't talk about the last part of the series because it changes so much. And the end of the series is you look back on the first book and you're like, how is that even the same book? So there are 7 books in the Throne of Glass series, and then there is a prequel of novellas called The Assassin's Blade, and I tell everybody that you have to read the prequel first. The prequel novellas talk about her life as an assassin and lead up to how she ends up in the slave camp. So you definitely need to read it to understand how she got there. One of my favorite things about Sarah J. Maas's work is that she leaves little hints everywhere. Like the very first novella will have repercussions on book 8. Like there's so many characters that you meet that pop up again. There's so many little hints and things that she leaves that you don't even realize until like book 7, and you're like, oh my gosh. You know, you could read one line in the first book and just be like, okay, that's pretty writing. And then in the 7th book, you're just like, I'm gonna stop myself from going on and on, because I could for days. It's definitely an upper YA series, especially the later books. There is lots of violence, but you like it the whole time. And luckily for you, the whole series is complete, so you don't have to wait 2 years after the most soul-destroying cliffhanger ever. So the next book on our list is another YA fantasy series. It's definitely at the top of the most popular YA series lists. If you don't know about it, you definitely should. It is called An Ember in the Ashes by Saba Tahir. So An Ember in the Ashes follows 2 teens that are trying to survive in this very brutal, domineering empire that was inspired by ancient Rome. Leia is a slave and Elias is a soldier. And so they're very different, but they might be very similar because neither of them is free. So in this empire, any type of defiance is usually met with death. So our main character, Leia, her brother is somehow arrested for treason. So in exchange for help from a rebel group to free her brother, she is charged to be a spy at the greatest military academy in the empire. There, Leia meets Elias, the school's finest soldier who should uphold all of the ideas of the empire. But he's secretly the most unwilling. He just wants to be free of the empire, but as fate would have it, Elias might just have to realize that he is an ember in the ashes that will spark change in their world. This book is so fast-paced, you will not be able to breathe half of the time, and Sabaa Tahir has crafted such a crazy ride that it will definitely make you feel some type of way. This book is pretty dark, and that's coming from someone who loves books about assassins. So I would definitely say it's upper YA, but it's definitely a series that you should be reading. The first 3 books are published, and a 4th and final book will come out December of this year. Next book on my list is another YA series. It's a newer series. The first book spent like 100 weeks on the New York Times National Bestseller list. So the series is called Legacy of Orisha, and the first book is called Children of Blood and Bone by Tomi Adeyemi. The author, Tomi Adeyemi, has described this book as Black Panther meets magic or an African Avatar the Last Airbender. So that's why you should read this book. In Children of Blood and Bone, our main character, Zaylee, remembers when her country, Orisha, had magic. And all of that changed when magic disappeared and this terrible king killed all the magic users. So Zaylee now has the opportunity to bring magic back. So she goes on this epic quest with a rogue princess across her kingdom to try to get magic back and take down the monarchy. And the whole time, the prince is following them and chasing them. And they're going through jungles and deserts and riding on lions and encountering all of these different magical creatures and people in this magical world. And it's amazing. The first 2 books in the series, Legacy of Orisha, are published. The third one will be published sometime soon, but I don't have an exact date. The next series on our list is a middle grade series. It's been around for a while, and this one is for fans of real, like true feeling fantasy, or even those Harry Potter fans out there. It's called Septimus Heap by Angie Sage. The first book, called Magic, follows main character Septimus Heap, who is the 7th son of the 7th son. When he was born, he was taken from his family, and you don't necessarily know why. And on that same night, his father found a little girl and took her in and raised her as their own. So for most of the book, there's this kind of mystery to it, and you're trying to figure out who is Septimus Heap. So there's this quest by Jenna, the little girl that was found, to figure out who she is, who he is, who everybody is. While this first book has a mystery behind it, it's all set in this fantasy realm where there's magic, and the series then goes on and on and on. It gets bigger and broader, and there's just more fantasy, more magic, and it's a great introduction series to the world of fantasy. This is definitely for fans of Harry Potter, but I would even say that it could be for younger than the typical Harry Potter range. This might even be a good book series to read before you read Harry Potter. There are 7 books in the whole series, so you have some time to spend with these characters and get all those AR points. The last series in our talk today is another middle grade series, perfect for fans of Percy Jackson and Harry Potter, and it's called Story Thieves by James Riley. Story Thieves is about a regular boy named Owen. His mother is a librarian, so he spends lots of his time reading books in the library, and he realizes that real life is boring, especially when you're not living out fun adventures like his favorite characters. But all of that changes when he sees his classmate Bethany walking around in the library, and he sees her pick up a book, open it up, and disappear into it. It turns out that her missing father is a fictional character, so she is on the hunt for her father, and she has to jump into all of these books to find him. Obviously, this is a huge secret. She can't let everybody know this because who knows what would happen. So Owen's like, that's cool, but you're gonna take me into my favorite series of all time for my silence. And that's when I'm like, all aboard the Hogwarts Express. As he gets into his favorite series, he realizes things aren't what they seem, and he realizes that his favorite character is not who he thinks he is. And he also realizes that he didn't think about the repercussions of him jumping into a book and what that means for the real world. This series is so much fun. It's action-packed. This is definitely for the readers, for the people that have ever wanted to jump inside their favorite book and get involved. This is definitely good for the middle grade readers, both boys and girls. I see a lot of people asking about this book and talking about this book, and I just want everybody to know about it because it's so much fun. So that is it today for our fantasy series that you should be reading. Obviously, there are a lot more fantasy series that you definitely should be reading. We have a lot more fantasy book talks coming all summer long about lots of different topics in the genre. We are very excited to show you these books because there are so many good ones and so many that you maybe never have heard of and are so great, and they just need to get attention and get readers. And until next time, happy reading.